This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Christopher Mitchell, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, and Carmen CJ. We pick back up with Harry in his bedroom as he awakens with no pain in his scar, nor any hangover from a nightmare foretelling of grave danger. Instead, he had slept soundly, and it is good this is so, as he has a big day ahead of him, for today is the Quidditch World Cup finals. Knowing how much Quidditch means to the boy, Sirius had acquired tickets for the event, and not just for himself, Harry, and Remus, but also for Ron and Hermione. In fact, he had offered to pay for the whole Weasley family to come along, but Arthur had politely declined, stating that Ludo Bagman already gave him some as thanks for helping out his brother, though due to not needing one for Ron, Molly is able to accompany her family to the game. Meanwhile, due to not needing to catch such an early port key, the Black, Loop and Potter family, along with Ron and Hermione who are staying with them, are able to rise at their leisure, have a filling breakfast, and then make their way to an underpass beneath a bridge around midday. Admittedly, Sirius is a little dismayed that they can't take the bike, either to the underpass or simply fly straight to the Cup Arena, though considering how there are 5 of them so they wouldn't all fit, not to mention the fact that 3 of them are underage and inexperienced at sidelong apparition, meaning that's also off the table, he begrudgingly concedes the point to Moody and agrees to go in a muggle taxi. After being dropped off at the underpass by the very confused driver, the group make their way under the bridge where an outdated and crumpled subway map is waiting for them. Having never seen a portkey before, Hermione is immensely curious, with Remus being happy to explain the logic of why they are often made from trash, though this is forced to be a rather brief conversation, as Sirius states that it's time, with all 5 of them grabbing hold as the map teleports to its destination. A moment later, the group find themselves at the staging area of the World Cup, and after handing the portkey to a ministry official who tosses it away, they're cleared to enter. From here, the rest of the afternoon is spent exploring the grounds, meeting up with the Weasleys and grabbing some souvenirs, with Sirius being sure to give Harry a little extra pocket money, since this is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and he wants his godson to enjoy it to the fullest. However, when night falls, they all reconvene and begin the trek through the forest and into the arena, with the Weasleys heading into the top box, while Harry along with his friends and family make their way into the heart of the stands, since when buying the tickets, Sirius had reasoned that the best place to experience something like this is in the thick of the action surrounded by fellow fans, rather than in a stuffy box with the likes of the Malfoys and various ministry types. In this, he is quite right, as it is truly a game for the ages, with both Ireland and Bulgaria giving absolutely everything while their supporters scream themselves hoarse. Then, when the Bulgarian seeker Victor Crumb chooses to end things on his terms by catching the snitch even if it costs his team the cup, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Sirius and Remus are at just the right eye level to see it play out, as though it was done for them specifically. In the aftermath of this shocking finale, the camp is set ablaze, at first metaphorically as Ireland supporters celebrate and Bulgaria's drown their woes, though later more literally, as a pack of masked and robed figures attack. Recognizing Death Eaters when he sees them, Sirius roars at the kids to get into the woods and hide, while he and Remus go to fight them off. And while this Harry may be more of a rule breaker than in canon, even he is not about to defy his godfather when he sees the look of protective passion in his eyes. Making his way into the surrounding forest with Ron and Hermione, Harry finds that they are not alone, as they run into Malfoy of all people, who seems in a particularly foul mood as he mutters something about finding his wand, while a little while later a terrified house elf comes into view calling for her master. However, they are not the only ones here, as from a small distance away, a man's voice cheers exultantly as he casts a spell into the sky, one that causes the image of a skull and snake to appear above them all, the Dark Mark. At once, Harry's scar burns, and as he cries out, several wizards appear all around them and fire stunning spells that the kids have to duck to avoid. In a tone of fury, a man with a well-trimmed moustache then begins accusing them of casting the Dark Mark, though fortunately Mr. Weasley is able to interject, reasoning that Harry Potter of all people would not summon he who must be named Symbol, with the man, who they learn is called Mr. Crouch, accepting this, and ordering the other wizards who are revealed to be ministry employees to fan out and find the culprit. As it turns out, this is the elf they saw earlier, who had been stunned by one of the errant spells and subsequently found with Malfoy's wand. To make matters worse, this elf is revealed to belong to none other than Mr. Crouch himself, only heightening his anger as he declares that he'll see her dismissed for this. Despite not having the highest opinion of house elves due to the incident with Dobby and other stories Sirius had told him about the Black family elf creature, Harry cannot help but feel sorry for this one as he has returned to Sirius and Remus, both of whom are mercifully unharmed, even if the former is a little disappointed he didn't get to duel the Death Eater leader, who he swears was actually Lucius Malfoy. When coupled with the fact that Draco was in the woods and it was his wand that cast the dark mark, Harry quickly comes to suspect that he was the caster, with Hermione chiming in that he probably framed that poor elf too. Though shaking his head, Ron retorts that he doesn't think so, since while he hates to defend Malfoy, they did overhear him muttering about having lost his wand, so whoever did it probably stole it so they wouldn't have to use their own. Not to mention Malfoy's got a nasally git voice, while whoever cast that spell sounded like a fully grown man, so while he agrees Crouch's elf didn't do it, he doubts it was Draco either. This does pose the question of who it was though, since knowing what snobs the Malfoys are, they almost certainly didn't join the post-game revelry where someone could have swiped the wand, meaning it must have been someone in the top box. Helpfully, Ron promises to ask his family about that in the days to come, since following this catastrophe it is decided that everyone should go home, with the ginger boy rejoining his family that evening, while the Grangers collect Hermione from Sirius's place the following morning. However, this is not the only grim portent, as about a week later, Harry has a strange dream, in which a man with straw-coloured hair and a voice he feels like he knows from somewhere implores a bundle of rags that his father was an enemy, so he could be the one. However, this is met by cold fury, as the bundle retorts that it must be Harry Potter, and this time the boy has no trouble recognizing the voice, as it belongs to Lord Voldemort. Upon waking with a start and a pain in his scar similar to what he felt when the Dark Mark was summoned, Harry wastes no time in telling Remus and Sirius, both of whom are deeply concerned, since it's safe to assume the two events are linked. Ever the practical one, Remus asks Harry to recount the dream to him again, giving every detail he can recall, since anything could be crucial, while Sirius firmly instructs him to tell Dumbledore if he has another of these dreams when he's at school, since the start of term is rapidly approaching. Though before this can happen, there is one more shock to rock these school holidays, and that is the news that Mr. Crouch has been murdered. According to the Daily Prophet, he and one of his former employees, a woman named Bertha Jorkins who had apparently been visiting, were found dead in the Crouch house last night. While the initial theory had been that one had killed the other or both had killed each other during a duel, as Crouch's expression had been one of horror and Bertha's of pain, when the Aurors had used Priori Incantatem to check the last spells used by the pair, neither had cast any form of jinx or hex, making the circumstances of their deaths a complete mystery. Having known Bertha in their youth, both Remus and Sirius find her involvement perplexing, as while neither doubt there are a lot of people who would want to do Crouch in, it's hard to believe anyone would care enough to kill a nosy busybody like her. Sagely, Remus proposes that maybe she simply stuck her nose in the wrong place at the wrong time and was taken out to eliminate any witnesses, with this being a theory Sirius can agree with. Though feeling remarkably out of the loop, Harry questions why anyone would want to kill Mr. Crouch, since he seemed like just a regular uptight ministry bloke to him. Chuckling that he sometimes forgets how young Harry is, Sirius explains that back during the war, Crouch was the head of magical law enforcement, and was known for being ruthless to Death Eaters and their allies, to the point that he legalized using unforgivable curses against them, and even sent his own son to Azkaban on suspicions that he was working for Voldemort. Sighing gravely, Remus states that was with Sirius's cousin, wasn't it? To which the bearded man nods. While looking shocked, Harry questions how he could do that to his own family. Bluntly, Sirius answers that he was completely inflexible when it came to his brand of justice, to the point where he wanted to send him to Azkaban for 2 years when he admitted to being an unregistered animagus as part of his evidence against Pettigrew. At the mention of that name, the shadow of the great snarling dog twists his face, with it falling to Remus to hastily add that luckily Dumbledore convinced him to reduce that to a fine. Clearly not wanting to talk about this anymore, Sirius changes the subject to something more lighthearted, though for the rest of the day, a faint tension follows the man wherever he goes that has little to do with his deceased schoolmate. Not long after this, September 1st rolls around, with Harry bidding his family goodbye and boarding the Hogwarts Express alongside Ron and Hermione. For the most part, it is an uneventful trip, though while passing Malfoy on the way to the loo, he overhears a couple of younger Slytherins fawning over how cool it is that he owns a wand that actually cast you-know-who's mark. Hating the idea that this is actually making Malfoy more popular with the Slytherins, Harry asks Ron if he found out anything from his family about the top box when he returns to their carriage, with the ginger-haired boy explaining that from what his dad told him, it was just them, the Malfoys, Cornelius Fudge, Bagman, the Bulgarian minister, and Crouch's elf who was holding a seat for him that he never claimed. Unfortunately, none of those people jump out as immediately suspicious, aside from obviously the Malfoys, though considering Sirius said Lucius was leading the burning of the camp, it's doubtful he cast the Dark Mark. Figuring they'll have to leave this mystery for now, the trio join their classmates in disembarking the Hogwarts Express and taking the carriages up to the castle, where the usually incredible opening feast is coupled with 2 bits of major news. First, that their new defense against the dark arts professor is the infamous aura Mad-Eye Moody, and second, that this year Hogwarts will be playing host to the Triwizard Tournament, in which 3 witches or wizards from competing schools will test themselves against impossible odds for the chance to win eternal glory. Naturally, Harry and Ron are both eager to enter, though Dumbledore quickly punctures these ambitions as he explains that due to the danger and difficulty of the tournament, only students aged 17 and above may enter, much to the chagrin of all those who don't meet his criteria. Nonetheless, things aren't all bad, as a few days into the term, the Gryffindor 4th years finally get their first defense against the dark arts lesson with Moody. From what the other year levels have said, he is a man who truly knows his stuff, making his lessons about as interesting as Professor Black's last year, though significantly more intense. From the outset, this last claim is proven true, as when the 4th years enter, Moody barks that none of them checked the doorway before stepping through, when there could have been a dark creature lurking behind it or a jinx on the doorframe, so they need to learn constant vigilance, or they'll meet a sticky end. Mark his words. Speaking of marks, for their first lesson, Moody decides to teach them about the Dark Mark, since it's what everyone's talking about in the wake of the World Cup. And in order to be vigilant, they need to know what it is, what it looks like, and what it means. For the first 2 steps, this is easy, as he simply conjures it into the room, before explaining that Death Eaters cast this into the sky at the scene of their crimes as a symbol of victory and intimidation. However, that's only one form of the Dark Mark. The other is branded into their arms, and can be used to signal you-know-who, or at least they could, back before he's defeated the hands of a certain someone. At this, all eyes turn to Harry, while Moody gives him a grizzled grin, as he states that with his track record, he could probably qualify as an Auror right now, just like his cousin if he wanted. Truthfully, Harry isn't that interested in a ministry job, having seen how many rules they have to follow. Though at the reminder that this man mentored Dora, he smiles too, with the pair agreeing to have tea sometimes so that Harry can catch the old Auror up on what his cousin's been doing, while he'll share a few stories from her training that she probably wouldn't tell him. In the weeks that follow, Moody's classes quickly become a favourite of the students, with them feeling like a natural continuation of Sirius's, in that while the younger man showed them how to combat dark wizards, Moody shows them what can happen if they fail to do so, frequently sharing the stories of how he got his various scars. However, he isn't the only one to get people talking, as soon as it is announced that the delegates from the other 2 wizarding schools, Durmstrang and Beauxbaton, will be arriving at Hogwarts on the night before Halloween. Subsequently, when the 30th rolls around, Harry, Ron, Hermione along with the rest of the school make their way out to the grounds to watch as a massive house-sized carriage pulled by large winged horses touches down, before an equally large woman steps forth and is introduced as Madame Maxime, the headmistress of Beauxbaton. With her are roughly a dozen students who all exude a similar grace to their teacher, though one in particular, a pretty blonde girl, has such a captivating air about her that Hermione has to chide Ron that his tongue is hanging out. Not long after this, a vast ship emerges from the lake containing the representatives from Durmstrang, led by their headmaster Igor Karkaroff, a shrewd-looking man with very furtive eyes. Evidently, Harry isn't the only one to think so, as from behind him, Moody lets out a gruff laugh and comments with relish that something's got Karkaroff worried. Good. However, it seems most eyes are not on the headmaster, with Ron elbowing Harry to get his attention as he points to the young man standing behind Karkaroff, who to the black-haired boy's surprise is Victor Crumb. Unfortunately, neither Harry nor Ron are given a chance to speak with Crumb, as at that point they are all led back into the Great Hall for a feast which will commemorate the arrival of their guests. Though they are not the only attendees, as Ludo Bagman from the Quidditch World Cup and Ron's brother Percy also show up, acting as ministry representatives and judges for the Triwizard Tournament. Speaking of, when everyone has eaten, Dumbledore officially declares the tournament open, explaining how the 3 champions will take part in 3 tasks across the school year, which will test their skill, cunning, and ability to handle danger. He then unveils an artifact called the Goblet of Fire, which will serve as an impartial selector for these champions, while stating that any eligible student may place their name in it, and the results will be announced in 24 hours' time. This naturally causes a lot of hubbub among the students, with many considering entering despite the age restriction, including Harry and Ron thanks to Sirius's influence on them from a younger age. Having listened when Dumbledore stated that he was putting an age line in place to prevent this, Hermione tells them that this won't work, though Harry grins that he has a plan. First, he's going to go under the invisibility cloak, since that's made them undetectable to most things they've encountered. Then he's going to have Ron use Wingardium Leviosa to lift him over the line so he never actually crosses it. Once he's over, he can then toss the cloak back to Ron and levitate him across, meaning all that's left is to stick their names in the goblet, then repeat the process to get back out. Eyes sparkling, Ron calls this plan brilliant, while Hermione disagrees, and firmly states that she'll have no part in it, though, having expected this, Harry tells Ron to follow him to the dormitory so they can grab the cloak and the marauders' map. As an added precaution, the boys decide to execute this plan at midnight, so none of the teachers can stop them, though this does mean keeping an eye out for Filch, Peeves, or Mrs. Norris on the map. Luckily, they run into none of them and make it to the entrance hall without issue, where on Harry's nod, Ron slips out from under the cloak and begins levitating his invisible best friend towards the glowing age line. At first, this seems to work, as Harry passes through and then begins to descend. That is until a terrible whoosh fills the hall that sends him flying back while the cloak lands several feet away. Rushing over to check on his mate, Ron is shocked to find Harry now sporting a long white beard, evidently an effect of the age line, though not having time to discuss beyond a brief "bloody hell," he deftly throws his cloak over both of them just in time to avoid Filch's cat who had been attracted by the whoosh. Nonetheless, this is not something Harry can hide, and so rather reluctantly, he and Ron make their way over to the hospital wing where Madame Pomfrey scolds them for not listening to Professor Dumbledore, though she does remove the beard, since the headmaster had warned that at least a few students would try. Having learned their lesson, the boys do not attempt to put their name in the goblet again, instead joining Hermione as she visits Hagrid the next day. For the most part, it is a fun way to spend a Saturday, even if they do have to spend more time in the company of their current Care of Magical Creatures assignment, the ill-tempered and highly explosive blast-ended Scroots, than they otherwise would have liked. When evening falls, the trio and Hagrid join everyone else in the Great Hall for their second feast in 2 days, though Harry, Ron and Hermione are truthfully more eager for what will come after dinner, and recognizing this is the prevailing sentiment, Dumbledore wastes no time in beginning the proceedings when the last plate fades away. As part of this, the lights are dimmed so that all can see the Goblet of Fire's flames clearly, with no one making a sound as it flashes and the first name emerges: Victor Crumb. This comes as a shock to precisely no one, with many Hogwarts and Beauxbaton students joining their Durmstrang peers in applauding Crumb as he makes his way up to the top table and down through a side door. To Harry's surprise, he finds the Bulgarian boy's gait to be rather duck-footed in contrast to the grace with which he handles a broom. Nonetheless, this is hardly the most pressing matter on his mind, as a moment later the Beauxbaton champion is named, the attractive girl with the blonde hair, Fleur Delacour. Then, last but not least, Hogwarts representative is named, with it being Cedric Diggory from Hufflepuff. For the most part, Harry has no opinion on this, since while he's played against Diggory in Quidditch, they otherwise haven't interacted. All the same, he'll cheer him on with the rest of the school. At least, that is what he thinks until the blazing goblet flashes once more and a fourth name emerges from the flames. Seeing as how the tournament is literally named for Triwizards, this has never happened before, though as Dumbledore reads the name on the paper, he utters 2 very shocked words: Harry Potter. At once the whole hall falls silent, as Harry feels every eye boring into him. More than a little startled, he looks to Ron, protesting that his mate knows he didn't put his name in the goblet since he was with him. Mercifully, the redhead does believe him, though he is one of the few who does, as angry buzzing rises from the other students, most of whom feel that he cheated, or got special treatment because of his fame, while in a slightly shaky voice, McGonagall instructs him to go through the same door as Crumb, Fleur, and Cedric. Doing as he's told, Harry makes his way into the antechamber, where initially Fleur and the others believe he's here to deliver a message, since the idea of a 4th champion never crossed any of their minds. However, this is dispelled a moment later, when the 3 headmasters, the pair of ministry reps, and McGonagall, Snape, and Moody enter in an attempt to clear up this blatant irregularity. In a calm voice, Dumbledore calmly asks whether Harry calmly put his name in the Goblet of Fire, and when the boy confesses that he didn't, since the age line stopped him, the old man lets out a deep sigh. Not willing to take Harry's word on face value, Madame Maxime protests that he is lying, though when Karkaroff surprisingly jumps to his defense, followed closely by Bagman, the tall woman recognizes that she's been outvoted, and so falls into a haughty silence. As for Percy, who is the youngest and most inexperienced judge, he questions Dumbledore on what's to happen, with the wizened old headmaster replying there is only one option: a binding magical contract has been forged, so Harry must compete. Though a simple declaration to make, there is much that must be discussed, with the 5 judges, Moody, McGonagall, and Snape all heading to Dumbledore's office, while the 4 champions are told to return to their dormitories or sleeping quarters. As they go, Cedric briefly stops Harry to ask how he did it, though when the younger boy protests that he really has nothing to do with this, the handsome Hufflepuff just shakes his head and walks off, clearly not believing him. In contrast, when Harry arrives at Gryffindor Tower, it is to a party in his honor, as once the initial shock wore off, everyone realized how cool it is that one of the Triwizard champions is from their house. Unfortunately, with all the uncertainty and tension of the meeting in the back room, the black-haired youth isn't in much of a mood for partying, and so slips up to his dorm where Ron and Hermione are waiting for him. Thankfully, both of them are on his side here, with Hermione immediately suggesting that he call Sirius, something Harry can see the sense in as he pulls out his mirror and activates it. Despite the hour, Sirius and Remus are quick to pick up, and when they see the grimness on everyone's faces, Remus urges them to explain what's going on. Trusting the pair to understand, Harry starts from the beginning, with he and Ron sneaking out to try and put their names in the goblet, a fact Sirius does not approve of, as he growls that he'd have thought after the World Cup and the dream he had, his godson would know better than to do something so reckless. Though when Remus clears his throat and dryly raises his eyebrows, the bearded man changes tack, saying that what he means is this tournament is an excellent opportunity for someone to hurt Harry and make it look like an accident. Fearing this will reopen the wounds from Sirius and Harry's stash last year, Remus cuts in, adding this isn't to say they don't trust Harry to look after himself, it's just the dark forces are on the rise, as made plain by the reappearance of the Dark Mark after 13 years, and it doesn't help that currently 2 former Death Eaters are at Hogwarts. From Sirius's stories, Harry already knows that one of them is Snape, though he does wonder who the second is, with the adults explaining that Karkaroff was one too, and that he only escaped Azkaban by naming names, so Harry should be very careful around him, since if he thinks the breeze is turning back in Voldemort's favour, he might be motivated to try and do him in as a way to earn his master's forgiveness for that prior disloyalty. Furrowing his brow, the black-haired youth promises to watch out, though it's odd since Karkaroff was on his side tonight, defending him and Dumbledore from Madame Maxime, though gravely, Sirius points out this might be because he had a vested interest in seeing him compete, so as he said, be careful. In the weeks directly following the Halloween feast, Harry finds himself the target of much scrutiny and disdain as everyone attempts to figure out how he entered, evidently not believing him just like Cedric. For those who are already his enemies, there's a golden opportunity, with Malfoy manufacturing badges that say, support Cedric Diggory, the real Hogwarts champion, until pressed, at which point their text changes to, Potter stinks in bright green letters. Naturally, when everyone who passes him flashes this message, Harry quickly grows agitated, with it taking Ron and Hermione to keep him from socking Malfoy like he did in their second year. However, this does eventually come to a head one afternoon outside the potions classroom, when Harry finally has enough and attempts to hex his rival, only to get Goyle instead, while Hermione is unlucky enough to catch a teeth-lengthening jinx from Draco in retaliation. Naturally, he escapes punishment for this, as Snape claims that he sees no difference in Hermione's appearance, causing her to rush off to the hospital wing, she having always been self-conscious about her oversized front teeth, while Harry and Ron both abuse Snape for his callous remarks and earn detention for their rudeness. Though it seems Harry's will have to be rescheduled, as Colin Creevey comes to collect him midway through the lesson for the first of his Triwizard champion duties, the weighing of the wands. For the most part, this is a press event more than anything, with Rita Skeeter from the Daily Prophet being present to take photos and do interviews with the champions. Figuring she can get the best headline out of the scandalous young one, not to mention he'll be easy to overwhelm, Rita pulls him into a closet where she begins a barrage of rapid-fire questions that she gives no time to answer, while her quick quotes quill scribbles away beside her. While at first this tactic is successful, when Harry spots the false and over-dramatized recounting of this interview, such as claiming that he's misty-eyed at the mention of his parents, he decides to take a leaf out of Sirius's book and starts responding with snark and haughtiness, even pushing back against Skeeter's claims as they appear on the page. Evidently, the libelous journalist does not appreciate this critique, as when her article appears in the papers the following morning, Harry is not painted as the tragic orphan looking to fill the void of his parents' love, but instead as a rude ruffian who flaunts rules for fun and has no respect for the hallowed traditions of the Triwizard Tournament. While this does come as a bit of a blow, since no doubt Malfoy and his cronies will use this to spread further antipathy for him throughout the student body, it is lessened a bit when Sirius and Remus send him a marked-up copy of The Prophet that evening, in which they have added their own humorous comments and a few less than flattering doodles of Skeeter, such as one where she is being trampled by hippogriffs. However, of these, Harry's favourite has to be their response to the line, Potter has the appearance of a delinquent with hair that would suggest he was raised by wolves, as the two marauders pithily go back and forth about which of them this insult is meant to be directed at. Fortunately, they aren't the only ones on Harry's side, as a few days later Ron tells Harry and Hermione that Charlie and a few of his colleagues are coming to Hogwarts next weekend, and staying for 5 days. With it not taking much to notice, this happens to coincide with the first task of the Triwizard Tournament, which is coming up on Tuesday the 24th. This suggests that the task will have something to do with dragons, and figuring Remus might know something about them since he does specialize in magical creatures, Harry decides to call him. However, it is actually Sirius who has a suggestion, as he proposes a conjunctivitis curse like what he was going to in canon, since dragons have vulnerable eyes, though here he also adds that a dragon will lash out when hurt, so Harry would do well to add a flame-freezing charm to his repertoire to avoid being burned alive. Now having a plan of action, Harry, Ron and Hermione spend every free moment practicing these two spells, even passing up a Hogsmeade weekend so they can do so without interruption. And while Madame Pomfrey does grow a little frustrated when the latter pair keep turning up to the hospital wing with eye infections that they need her to fix, the bespectacled boy is deeply grateful to his friends for their help. Additionally, when Charlie arrives the following Saturday morning, Harry and Hermione join Ron in visiting him, with the elder Weasley showing them the 4 specimens, and slipping Harry the tip that he'll need to collect a golden egg from one of them, figuring it's only fair he get this small leg up to compensate for having 3 less years of magical experience than his rivals. Speaking of, due to going in the morning rather than at night, Harry does not know that Hagrid is going to show Madame Maxime the dragons, thus tipping off Fleur, while Karkaroff will sneak into the forest to learn the nature of the task for Crumb, meaning that in his eyes, he has no reason to tell Cedric, since that would be giving an unfair advantage to his schoolmate over the 2 guest champions who he erroneously believes are also in the dark. As a result, when Tuesday the 24th arrives, Harry says nothing as he is led down into the grounds where Fleur, Crumb, Cedric and Bagman are waiting, with a ministry worker formally revealing the first task and instructing them to reach into a bag and pull out a model of the dragon they'll be facing. Unfortunately, Harry does still get the Horntail, meaning his will be the hardest challenge, though in turn, it means that he gets to go last, which is meant as compensation, since he gets more time to prepare, even if it's only a matter of minutes. However, due to having already had a week of prep time, Harry instead finds himself fretting and pacing, barely able to hear anything beyond snippets of commentary from Bagman and occasional cheers or gasps from the crowd. This only increases his dread, so that when he's told that it's his turn to compete, his legs feel a bit like jelly during those first few steps out of the waiting tent. Nonetheless, he does not hesitate, emerging into a small arena of sorts, where the Horntail stands protectively over its clutch of eggs, and spotting the golden one almost immediately, he puts his plan into action. As he had hoped, the dragon's first instinct is to let out a roar in an attempt to scare him off, with this allowing him to fire a flame-freezing charm directly down its gullet. This earns high praise from Bagman, who comments that Mr. Diggory and Miss Delacour would have done well to remember that handy little spell, though in that moment, Harry barely hears him, instead moving into the second step, as by envisioning the Horntail's yellow eye like a golden snitch, Harry is able to put his years of Seeker training to good use, as he aims and fires the conjunctivitis curse right into the small moving target. At once, the beast's eyes turn red and inflamed, with it stumbling back and letting loose a gout of fire, though thankfully, here the flame-freezing charm works its magic, as when it passes over Harry, he is unharmed, freeing him up to take off at a sprint towards the golden egg. However, nothing can be so easy, as while its eyes and flames may be neutralized, there is still the dragon's horn tail for which it is named, which is taken to thrashing around wildly as the beast spins in place, trying to ward off an attacker it can no longer see. As a result, the youngest champion soon finds himself face to Spike with the appendage, forcing him to leap to the side just when he is about to grab hold of the egg, though this has the unintended side effect of alerting the Horntail to where he is, with it making a more concerted effort now to swipe and jab at him with its surprisingly long tail. Briefly, Harry wishes he'd put more time into getting the hang of summoning charms when Professor Flitwick had taught it to them a few weeks back, since the egg is right there, though now is not the time for what might have been, as right now, he needs to keep his focus on dodging and rolling away from that terrifying tail. Unfortunately, even with this, the dragon is still able to land a couple of slashes that draw blood, all the while shepherding him closer to its powerful fanged jaws. Then, as it brings the tail round in a wide arc, the black-haired boy realizes that it's trapped him in a deadly circle, seemingly spelling his doom. That is until he is reminded of another circle he wished to cross, and so taking off at a sprint towards the egg once more, he points his wand at himself and cries, Wingardium Leviosa. At once, he begins rising into the air, with his existing momentum carrying him forward, so the second later he passes over the Horntail's head. Then, as he ends the spell just in time to avoid a final slash from the spiked tail, he drops to the ground and rolls, gathering the golden egg in his hands as he does so, and completing the first task. In an instant, the crowd erupts with cheers and applause, with Harry only now realizing how much he was blocking them out when the sound returns at full volume. Thankfully, he is not made to endure it for long, as when Charlie and his colleagues rush in to secure the Horntail, Harry is led to the medical tent, where Madame Pomfrey is able to give him a few stinging drops of Dittany to heal up his wounds. From the looks of things, he got off pretty light, as Fleur is currently in treatment for a few nasty-looking burns, while Cedric's clothes are in tatters and he is missing much of his hair, having seemingly had a particularly rough time against his dragon, due to going first with no forewarning. Meanwhile, Ron and Hermione soon join him in the tent, with the latter questioning him on whether he's okay, while the former states they must have been mental to ever want to enter this ruddy competition. Agreeing wholeheartedly after that ordeal, Harry leans on both of them as he is called back into the arena to receive his score while Bagman Bagman recaps his performance, making special note to mention both the cool-headed logic of employing a flame-freezing charm right off the bat, and the sheer mad brilliance to use a simple levitation charm to get himself out of a dire predicament. As a result, it comes as little surprise when Bagman gives Harry a perfect 10 for his score, a seeming anomaly, as Hermione comments that he didn't give Crumb that despite having a similar strategy and managing to pull it off without being injured. As for Dumbledore, he gives Harry an 8 on account of his injuries and the destruction of some of the real eggs when the dragon was thrashing about, with Madame Maxime being less charitable and giving him a 6. Wanting to follow the lead of those in power but not seem overly biased towards Harry, Percy settles on an 8 as well, while Karkaroff shocks them all by following Bagman's example with another perfect 10. Making Harry's total score 42 out of 50, the highest of any champion by a good bit. This coming from the youngest of the bunch sets the crowd abuzz, though thankfully, Harry doesn't have to listen, as he, Cedric, Fleur and Crumb are all directed back into the waiting tent by Bagman. Here he returns their eggs to them, with the cryptic statement that these are their clues to the second task, which will be held exactly 3 months from today. Then, with a big boyish smile, he praises them one last time for their efforts and tells them to be on their way. Truthfully though, Harry barely hears this. Is it the news that he won't have to deal with another task for 3 whole months? A sense of relief like he has never known washes over him. Yes, he must decipher whatever clue the egg holds, not to mention survive 2 more tasks, but for now at least he can rest, since after what he's just been through, he sorely needs it. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.